coming in and sitting down and getting yourself ready for a very, very interesting subject, one of my favourite subjects. We're talking today about ports as a gateway for maritime resilience. Anyone following the news in the last few days might think about missiles in the Red Sea, about Panama Canal. You know, there's a lot of parts of the maritime system which seem less than resilient right now. But today we're going to be focusing on ports. And why is this one of my favourite things? Well, number one, it's all about resilience. And we've been talking about resilience for five to 10 years now. And it's great to see things coming together and things moving ahead and the real sort of the race to resilience picking up the subject and us collectively taking action. It's one of my favourite things because many of the people in this room are some of my favourite people. We've been working with Arup, we've been working with the Resilience Shift, we've been working with Lloyd's Register over the years, and very happy to have so many people come together to see the fruits of our work. And it also gives me an opportunity to use one of my favourite phrases, which is that you're only as resilient as the least resilient part of your supply chain. Right? So if you're ever talking to global businesses about their products, their services, about what they're trying to do, that they need to consider the resilience of their total supply chain, and ports is a key part of the things they should be thinking about. So, I'm Ruth Bumfrey. I'm the Chief Executive of Lloyd's Register Foundation. As we've been saying, that more people than ever depend on the critical services provided by infrastructure, and when they fail, the consequences can be catastrophic for public safety and well-being, as well as the economy and the environment. Maritime infrastructure faces increasing shocks and stresses from the physical effects of climate change. Step away from the mic. Ports provide the critical link between shipping and communities, and they're facing urgent and costly related climate challenges. Frequent storms, high winds, storm surges, and future issues due to sea level rise. In an increasingly complex and uncertain global economy, resilience is essential to supporting the business continuity of ports and the broader supply chains that are reliant on ports. Building in resilience can help with more inclusive and equitable economic development. It's a very important element of this work, to think about that inclusive and equitable economic development, and can better protect our natural resources. Coupled with the urgent need to decarbonise global supply, this presents ports with both risks and opportunities which can be leveraged to enhance global resilience to climate shocks through greater efficiency and capacity in trade, in early warning systems, and evidence-based decision-making. That's why at COP27 last year, we launched the Maritime Resilience Breakthroughs, aligned with the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda, which provided a framework for ports to contribute towards resilient systems, oceans and coastal systems, infrastructure and human settlements. And 1 year on, we're here today to discuss the progress, to demonstrate real action and what else is needed to scale and mainstream resilience. And I know that later on, Catherine Palmer will be picking up some of the findings of that report. So the next thing for me to do is I'm very proud to be able to present with you Rob Kay, who is from the America's Climate and Sustainability Service Leader for Arup. More importantly, he's got 35 years of experience in coastal adaptation. And Rob, we're looking forward to hearing from your experience today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Thank you. Okay, we made it, right? End of the day. So I'm going to take my jacket off, if that's okay with you. It feels a bit like we need to do that. Before I just run through the slides, I'd just like you to actually just have a look at people just around you, and just, if you could, without it being weird and creepy, and just make a commitment to actually have a conversation through this when you walk out about how you're going to work together to increase maritime resilience. Thanks. All right, could we have the next slide, Dave? Thanks. So we've been proud, honoured, enjoyed working with you too, Ruth, to develop the Ports Resilience Framework, the Resilience for Ports, with a number 4. Working, of course, with Resilience Rising, and we'll hear from the CEO, Seth Schultz, later. And the key thing here is that ports, of course, are a system. obvious. That is one of these obvious things. Ports are a system, of course. But what that means is that each port is unique. There's a saying in the ports world: you've seen one port, you've seen one port, which means that every single port has a unique set of attributes around it. The only thing that is really common to all ports is they are interconnected systems. They're interconnected systems within the so-called fence line of the port itself. And of course, by definition of what a port does, it's connected both into the maritime regime and then into the inland regime as well, simply by the fact that they are intermodal places. And so the Resilience for Ports framework is fundamentally based around operationalizing a systems-based view of port resilience. Thanks, Dave. One of the other things with this document too is it has really great graphics in the way in which it's put together. So please download, use these as much as you can. So again, what a systems-based view thinks about is around the interdependencies of all of the individual elements, infrastructure elements of a port, of course, but also the interactions, the interdependencies between port communities, those that work in ports, but of course those that live around the port infrastructure, many of whom are disproportionately disadvantaged by the activities of the port, of course, themselves through air pollution and so on, and by the sheer nature of where ports are located, again, vulnerability to shocks and stresses from climate change. Thanks, Dave. So just to pause a little bit onto the maritime resilience breakthroughs from the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda. I just want to pause a little bit there for a second and just think about some examples of what port resilience means. But one thing I just really want to pick up perhaps for the discussion later on is that one of the breakthroughs says, and I'll quote it, 30% of global maritime trade moves through climate adapting ports. So it's this very much sense of a journey of adaptation through ports. Again, as Ruth said, looking at, again, resilient human settlements and resilient coastal and ocean systems as a result of that. Thanks, Dave. Okay, so what does the port resilience framework looks like? It has these three key elements about putting the concepts of a system-based design, system-based thinking into action. And you can see this notion of three interdependent systems. Thanks, Dave. So the theory of impact here is not just to think about, well, why are you implementing a systems-based approach? It's thinking about actually what the impact is. The impact, of course, is through the development of resilience ports into thriving communities, thriving port systems as well. Thanks, Dave. So this is what the framework looks like. You can see that there are these three interdependent systems. Each one has a sort of sub-element. Again, I won't go through all of these, but each one of them has a descriptor about actually how to operationalize the approach by thinking about each one of them doing analysis independently, but again, being able to put these together into an integrated system. Again, thinking through an equity lens. That's very important. I should have said that at the top. Thanks, Dave. All right, so announcing that the combined knowledge that's come through from this process is being put together into a new website. The ports, I have to make sure I read it correctly. Resilience for Ports Knowledge Portal. Now you're thinking, Rob, how can I get my hands on this fantastic information that's just being launched? Dave, can you do the next slide? Go back, sorry. There is a QR code, I think. Oh, no, there is not. Lurking. There is. Is it lurking? I can't see it from here. All right, everybody get their phones out. No, seriously, everybody get their phones out. And take a picture of this. It's also easily Googleable. So, call to action, for discussion later by the panelists, is to engage in this process. Share your knowledge, download the information that's there, and interact to enhance the critical role that ports play in global maritime transport, but of course the health and well-being of coastal communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rob. At the heart of your talk was people and the communities, and at the heart of the systems we create, we must create systems that are for people, not try and make systems without the people and fit the people into it. And that's a very important part of this transition. I also love that you've implemented a platform to share, and that's a key thing as we look going forward. So now I want to welcome to the stage Catherine Palmer, who is the maritime lead in the UN High-Level Climate Champions team, and we're very proud to call her a colleague as well in the foundation. And Catherine is going to moderate our panel discussion on mainstreaming resilience. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite my panelists to join me, as it seems a little lonely up here. So I'd like to welcome Piotr Konopka, who is the Vice President at DP World on energy transition. And so please do take a seat. I'd also like to welcome Claire Martin, who is the Vice President of Sustainability at CMA CGM. We have Wei Xiang Niu, who is the Director for Decarbonisation and Net Zero Pathways from Singapore Maritime and Ports Authority. And we have Marco Yamaguchi, who is the Manager for Transport and Logistics Division at the African Development Bank. So welcome to my panelists. And I think this will be a very interesting discussion. So we've got some diverse representation here from across different parts of the industry, of all of which interface and with the role of ports and how essential they are to society, communities, and supply chains. And I just wanted to pick up a little bit on the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda Progress Report that was launched yesterday on Resilience Day, so 1 year on, and it really picks up on some things that are actually quite relevant to the maritime sector. So picking up on the importance of nature-based solutions in ocean and coastal systems, and recommending the inclusion of nature-based solutions in the coastal and ocean and marine NDCs. It also picks up on the fact that cities and regions are prioritizing adaptation because they're at the front line of the climate crisis, and that multi-level governance is critical to improve planning and finance. And I think when we look at the role that our panelists have here, we will play a role in that multi-level governance and supporting planning of ports and terminals as we go forward. And the final thing I wanted to pick up on was that the transport and energy systems are underrepresented. And adaptation-related funding for transport infrastructure needs to significantly increase. And so I think that's quite a relevant topic here for, I'll be interested to hear Marco's views on that as we get into discussion. So I think I will start by asking Piotr to share your views. We're living in an increasingly complex and uncertain global economy. Resilience is essential to supporting the business continuity of ports and the broader supply chains. So it'd be really interesting to hear what your views are and what actions you, as a logistics provider, like yourself, you're taking to support a resilient maritime sector.
Sure. To start with, maybe a bit about DP World. Our tagline is from the factory floor to customer door, meaning the full logistics chain across ports, shipping, and logistics. And I often tell this story when I was at COP26 and I was asked to speak on a panel about adaptation. There were 5 panelists, and actually 3 talked about their net zero strategy. So that was 2 years ago. You know, that was kind of the level of understanding in the industry. And I remember coming back and saying, we need to set up a working group on this topic. So we set up an asset resiliency working group, which comprised of HSE, myself, that's the department that I sit in, engineering, there was insurance, there was risk, and there was finance. So it was a very broad stakeholder group. And we started off with some questionnaires that we used to send to our operating entities. But at some point we said, stop, we actually need data. And by data, meaning the climate change scenarios, the RCPs from 2.6 to 8.5, and trying to find a way how we can translate that into port resilience. So we've hired a company called Jupiter and a consultancy called Guidehouse, who helped us put all of this analysis together. Actually, there's a white paper that came out today, if anybody's interested, on DP World's site. It's fascinating. It basically took the RCP scenarios and overlaid them on the operational characteristics of every single port equipment. So for example, we said, you know, there is a type of crane that can only take wind speeds up to X, and under different climate change scenarios, what is the probability that we're going to hit that X within a specific time frame? So we found that actually towards 2050, we are not expecting significant changes or significant impact on the port. It's only past 2050, especially in more aggressive scenarios, that we're going to see a few percentage reduction in our total revenue, just because of the climate change impacts. Now, this was just our work kind of internally within the port. Then there is the broader supply chain topic, of course. That's the next step with that group. You know, we literally just finished that work to do it internally, but we recognize that if trains don't run, if trucks can't come to the port, it doesn't matter that your quay is not flooded or your cranes continue operating. It really doesn't matter because the port can't function anyway. So I would say that's the next step in that analysis.
Much. That's really interesting, and I'm sort of bringing in a little bit more maybe of the supply chain angle. Claire, as CMA CGM, you operate ships, you're a logistics provider. You know, how do you look at building in resilience within supply chains and also resilience within your assets, the ships as well?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. Especially because we are not only a shipping line company with 300 shipping lines around the world, we are also a terminal operator, and we operate also warehouses on terminals or in the inland. We are also in charge of the inland logistics, and we are a global player in the logistics sector as well. The way first of all, we are already observing, it's different from your case apparently, because you said we are not impacted until 2050, if I understand well. I'm pretty surprised because we observe already a certain number of situations where we cannot anymore operate some of our assets. Recently, we were obliged to refuse some business because the heat was so high in warehouses that medicines goods were not we were not able to keep them because we were not able to reach the expected temperature. So this is typically one of the examples, and there are many others. For this reason, like you mentioned Panama Canal, we already see direct impact on our way to operate in the Panama Canal. We see this in the Amazon River as well because of droughts. So we already are experiencing this. This is why we have launched this year a pretty large study about the way we can adapt we can first study the potential impacts over the coming years, to measure their magnitude in questions of heats, questions of storms and high winds, water stress, and there is a fourth one, which is sea level rise. So on those 4 items, and it's very specific from one area to the other. The complexity of this topic is that from one part to the other, you have to readapt your study, and in order to forecast the type of events that can happen, the probability, the frequency of those events, in order to anticipate what we will have to invest to adapt our assets, these terminals, for instance, in this respect. So it's a lot of work to do, where we have already a full plan on this, because as we know, it can have a direct impact on our business. The more we anticipate this preparation, the better prepared we will be, and the less expensive it will be on our P&L.
Great, thank you very much. So it's interesting perspective. Like you said, you're seeing impacts already within your business of the hazards from climate change. And I think the Panama Canal is a good example as experiencing today drought. And so that is really impacting shipping routes. So maybe I'll move on to Wei Shang. And so to say, well, Singapore is depends on the critical services that ports and supply chains provide. And so from your perspective, from the MPA's perspective, can you share any examples of what it is you're doing to understand resilience impacts and maybe enhance resilience?
Right. So I think for those who are not so familiar with Singapore, I mean, we are a small island state, right, in Southeast Asia, and the port is absolutely critical, right, to our economy. So it is actually, so we take climate change quite seriously in Singapore. And if you've been following, you know that we are actually in the process of building a new port, right? So we are reclaiming land to build this new port. So what this means is it gives us an opportunity to kind of redesign certain things from the ground up perspective, right? To make sure that it is future-proof, that there's resilience in it. And when we think of climate change, we look at it usually from 2 angles: adaptation and mitigation. So in terms of adaptation, while reclaiming the port, we are mindful of potential sea level rises going forward. So our ports will have to be reclaimed to a certain height above mean sea level. So to future-proof it, we have to make provisions for future floodgates, pump stations, and all that. So to make sure that the ports can continue to function, right? If some of this risk do materializes, especially sea level rises. So this is all about some of the examples of the things that we are doing to adapt for adaptation. But we also think that there's also a lot of scope for mitigation. So to help in terms of having the port play a role in mitigation. So for example, the port is also consumes energy, its operations. So what we have done is we have committed a net zero target of 2050 for our ports in Singapore. To do so, we are electrifying as much of the operations as we can, automating. And going further, we are trying to think of the port as kind of like an energy hub, how it can be a place to actually produce renewable energy, how we can solarize as much of the port as possible. This is something that's currently under intense study. And also, how do we produce energy from other sources? So for example, in Singapore, you realize that our waves are actually not tidal waves are not very big, but we have found some solutions that allows us to put turbines underwater that would generate some power from low speed waves. So we are trying to harness as much as we can, right, the energy from the environment to help to green the port as much as possible. And this then will allow us to do many other things as well, such as the provisions of eventually co-ironing, to electrify our hovercraft fleet, for example, and things like that. And this will all help to enhance the resilience of the port. There was also some talk about community. I mean, we are not so forgetting about the port community, especially if you think about where the maritime world is moving towards, the kind of fuels that we are moving into, like methanol, or even ammonia, right? The safety, of the people working in ports and all that are also of utmost importance to us. So the development of standards, we are doing intensive work now on safety studies, modeling, and things like that to help ensure that the port continued to function in a safe and a conducive environment for everybody. Yep.
Great, thank you very much. And so some very interesting perspectives there from both ports and logistics providers. So Marco, if I'd like to bring in yourself here, because the Africa Development Bank, you've had a long-standing engagement of addressing fragility and building resilience, and so I wondered if you'd be able to share and provide examples of how your work enhances climate resilience and supports an inclusive and equitable economic development in Africa.
Okay, now, yes. Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Yes, we have, maybe I want to introduce a different initiative that we are working on surrounding the climate action. But by the way, this I learned that I didn't know that the colleague from DP World is with me. That just for a little bit the marketing purpose, on the day of the transport in the 2 days from now on the 6th, we are having the joint event on exactly talking about the smart logistics and the green supply chain. So that's I'm organizing at the 4:30 in Africa Pavilion. So if you guys have a time, please come over. And then also our president Adesina is joining that EU event on the same the day 6, the 6th of December. That's a marketing purpose. But going back to your question. We have since 2 years ago, we have again, our president Adesina launched a big commitment on adaptation space. The working with our strategy partner called the GCA, Global Center on Adaptation, and then with a big the target to mobilize 25 billion the US dollar in 5 years. So until 2025, so it's all come to me. And then so we've been working a lot on the mitigation side, but now maybe this is the nature of Africa, but adaptation is all about. So we've been heavily working on the how to increase the climate resilience infrastructure business. As a matter of the fact, so as the head of the origination, we are trying to make add some new element from the all of the infrastructure investment to make it the mainstream or the adaptation component into it by investing a minimum 10% more than our capex. And then how we do that is again is working with the GCA. We created the program called the AAAP, Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program. In which we are kind of already standardized our course of activity. First, we invite the GCA guys to come over to our the pipeline project, including the port, to conduct the climate risk assessment, and then doing the kind of the adaptation component, the analysis into it, and based on that, we expect to have, understand what is the area for us to make additional investment on adaptation on the climate resilience space. So we from our point as a financier, we are open, but they will tell us, what depend on let's say the port, the seawall, or any against the coastal erosion. And it depends, but they will tell us. And then so all of our current investment in the infrastructure space is we are doing like something like this. And from our point of view, so by the time we know that what area we want to make investment, the new additional investment in adaptation space, we make the most of the different climate facility available. Internally, we do have, thanks to the different donors, we have 4 or 5 already the climate facility internally. That is easy, to tap on. And also, obviously, we closely work with GCF or the JEF, so we can also easily, and for this particular decarbonization, we are working with CIF. Maybe you guys know that they are soon launch the new program called the Industry Decarbonization Program. So they are very keen to work with us to launch the green the shipping initiative that we are planning to do in Africa. So that's another pocket that we can tap on and working with the CIF. So yes, so we already kind of standardized the activity in the AAAP. Well, we have many activity, but in the transport space, a little bit far different from the port, the maritime. We also do a lot, public transportation, the affordability, the transportation project to support. One of the example that we providing the big funding is to in South Africa. It's called SA Taxi. It's a kind of regulated or integrated, the regulated the transports, but it's a reality in South Africa still. We are supporting the on-land facility, the access to finance through the SA Taxi, which is the financing company in the transport, the minibus industry, and then on-land to the SME ownership who don't have access to finance normally, but with we are AAA agencies, institutions, so we can provide. The cheap funding to them, so we are supporting, that to make a stable growth of the public sector transport in South Africa. So we do sector by sector in transport space. We are already doing, the financing together with the some, sort of, the climate, the resilience activity. Maybe I stop here.
Great, thank you. So some real good examples of how you're financing resilience and adaptation in your projects that you're financing in Africa. So I think there are, I don't know if there's any questions from our remote audience. There's one. So I don't know if you caught what Theo said. So I think it was, if ports are so important and critical and essential for global trade and livelihoods, then why aren't people shouting from the rooftops that something needs to be done? And I think that's actually very similar to one of my questions here when I said there is an urgent need to do this. There is an urgent need. And I'm sure maybe, people, my panelists might have experienced specific disruptions in their business because of freak weather storms and things like that, and we've experienced those disruptions. So if there is such an urgent need, how can we actually leverage that urgent need? So maybe, Bill.
Hello? I will take that opportunity also to clarify a point I made, and thank you for picking up on this, Claire. We are absolutely seeing impacts of climate change in our operations today. What I was referring to is, when you look towards 2050 and we try to look at it from the DP World Group or the company perspective, the impact on revenues is looking like it's going to be relatively small just from these internal, just from these kind of internal acute situations. However, we've lost multiple shifts in Canada last year because of floods and then because of extreme cold in winter. And there are a number of examples like this. It's just these are kind of quite, rapid, acute instances which you can relatively quickly solve. Why are people not shouting?
Which is adaptation.
It is, yeah.
Issues which are already happening. This is the first step in adaptation.
Absolutely.
Being reactive,
Yeah.
being agile
Yeah.
to be able to overcome what is happening. But we have this to do in the short term, and then in the more long term. Sorry if I interrupt, but perhaps I can. I see two, you were asking, Catherine. I see, first of all, how to finance the next steps. CMA CGM has, for this, established an investment fund, a 1.5 billion investment fund, dedicated on one hand to accelerate the decarbonation, so attenuation, but also to work specifically on terminals and inland and warehouses on how to adapt and to change a certain number of patterns in order to be better prepared, not only now, but for the next events to arrive. And the second topic, which is to me very interesting, and this is why it's a good thing that we sit together with the port authorities, is collaboration. Collaboration among the different stakeholders, the port authorities, the terminal operators, shipping companies, the states, the cities. If we want to develop what we call the green maritime corridors, we have to integrate the systems that you mentioned, gentlemen, in your presentation, which was very interesting. And because we have seen that in a system which can be compared as a blood system. I mean, the shipping industry is a kind of the blood system of the global economy. What we hate the most is blockage, is congestion. All what we've seen in the experience, unfortunately, during COVID and after COVID, congestion of this blood system is a disaster for everyone because it disturbs everything. So, and this is typically why we have to anticipate as much as possible to avoid this blockage to happen and cooperate all together.
And also maybe just to pick up on the second part of that question, why are people not screaming from the rooftops about it? I don't know. People should. I think, even if we are extremely successful at dropping the emissions to net zero by 2050 and limiting the global warming to 1.5 degrees, we're still going to be living in a different world than we're living right now. And I think a lot of the people don't appreciate this. I mean, certainly I am one of those people internally within DP World who tries to scream about as much as we can that, even if we do activate that $1.5 billion green loan we raised for mitigation projects, adaptation is still going to be required.
There's a question from the floor over here. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to build up on the conversation. I'm Wasim Dbouk from the University of Southampton, and I've been doing research on carbon capitalization and storage, and I'm looking at the storage of liquefied CO2 in ports environments. But I'm also involved in a lot of research at the university around alternative fuel source shipping as well, and the risks that it creates for port communities and so on. And my comment is on the control of major hazards in ports, and I think there hasn't been enough engagement with ports communities for them to know about the risks that are coming their way, actually, for them to shout about it from the rooftops. And my question actually related to this is around how much work is being done from a regulatory perspective and how much sharing is happening, because the port industry, the shipping industry is a global industry, and we all rely on it. How much sharing is happening on a global level? I've looked at the UK level where things are very disjointed. The regulation for ports is very, case by case, depends on the port that you're working in. I think how much I think we need to expand the role for ports and for harbor authorities and harbor masters to make those right decisions to safeguard local communities as well. So what are your thoughts about sharing that knowledge and coordinating, making things consistent globally? Thank you.
Would anyone like to answer that? Maybe Wei Sheng?
So I think I think this is something that I alluded to just now when I said that, well, we are doing a lot of intensive safety studies and modeling, especially around many of these new fuels they are coming up. Just this year, when we did our first container ship methanol bunkering, I think we got an opportunity to put many of these systems in place. So I think those who were around or who have read our release will know that before the bunkering exercises took place, we did, it was a few months or even up to a year kind of preparation, right? And we did a few exercises, safety hazard workshops, and a lot of modeling. During the bunkering exercise, we actually had even drones flying around just to monitor in case they picked up any anomalies. And all this was just only for methanol, which is already as much, I would say, less toxic fuel than say ammonia. Which is one that is, I think, is on everybody's mind in terms of safety. So we have commenced a lot of these studies. We have brought these discussions to many places. I think Singapore has been building our network of green and digital shipping corridors. We have been sharing some of these learnings at some of these platforms. We've been hosting some forums like the C40 Green Ports Forum, where we have also shared some of these lessons. And more importantly, we're also bringing some of these things to the IMO for sharing, so that that there is. First, we have to build the awareness that people should know that this is what we're talking about. I mean, at what ppm will ammonia kill you and all that. I think there is just not that level of awareness yet. And how do we then, after that, how do we then build the safety standards going forward, right? But why? I mean, the question is, why is Singapore so concerned about this? I mean, the answer is simple, because we are a very small country, so that there's really not much of a safety buffer for anything. So we would have to get it right and get it right as much as possible. So once we understand the characteristics, done the modeling, then I think a lot of it is our effort would then be on mitigation. What can we do to mitigate some of these risks so that our local community, population is kept safe? So this is an area that actually we are absolutely serious about, and we're welcome to engage anybody on this in this matter.
Yes, question here.
Hi, Amy Barnes-Marsh. A question for the Port of Singapore. Can you talk us through the process you went through to understand the cost benefit of the various resilience measures that you're going to be implementing, or internal barriers there are, how you decided about whether you would prepare for RCP 8.5, just how that process went, because I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of people come up against.
Yeah, I think, we are reclaiming our port in phases, right? So it's while we have started opening the first phase, actually we are still reclaiming the later phases. And you know that every time the report comes up, and we build it based on certain specifications and on that point in time, what the projected sea level rises are, and actually every time the projections get revised, the levels just keep going up. So I mean, I wouldn't say we have solved it completely, but I think it is a challenge that we have to decide each round how much do we have to reclaim it so that our port is sufficiently resilient against sea level rises of the future. And besides that, actually, what other sort of measures that we can take to protect? This is really still something that we think quite carefully about, because what has to be balanced again, of course, is a cost of doing so, because it is every meter that you build above sea level. I mean, for a port that is like the new port that we're building is more than 1,000 hectares. It's not trivial. So something that we struggle with. I mean, we think through very hard about each time. I mean, I can happy to engage a little bit further on the details, but it is. I would say there's no straightforward answer for us right now. Thanks.
So much. I'm Rose from Coral Vita and working with DP World actually on a new project here in Dubai. And my question was about when you're thinking about resilience and sustainability in a port, how do you think about electrifying and conservation in the systems of a port? Is that something that's on your mind, or is it mostly just focused on resilience, looking kind of in the long view of the future? Is there a view towards electrification and marine conservation within the port systems for anyone?
Do you mean biodiversity conservation or?
So biodiversity is one thing. Looking at kind of maintaining a stable ecosystem within on the biological side as things change in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, for the CMA CGM group, again, we work a lot on climate, attenuation, adaptation. It happens that we consider that also it is in our responsibility to look into what happens around biodiversity preservation, restoration, if in some cases it is destroyed. And we are conducting a certain number of programs on the coastal areas, in ports, around, first of all, how to measure the impact of our activity on the biodiversity, maybe in the ports or in coastal or in the large deep sea, and then finding the right projects together with the communities, together with our employees, also involving our employees, which are more and more sensitive to these topics, and nature preservation. That's why I was asking. So this is something that we're undergoing in the 160 countries in which we are operating. So this is one of our key programs also on this topic, which is indirectly a kind of resilience program, I would say.
Hello, yeah. Oh, first of all, congrats on your Earthshot Prize award last year. That was fantastic, and I'm looking forward to seeing the installation. Look, whenever we are building a new port, especially at the building stage, it's absolutely critical that you conduct an ESIA, the Environmental and Social Sustainability Impact Assessment, and then follow that up with an environmental management plan. You very often build ports in areas that have been there's been something with biodiversity, or they've been protected, but they have been allocated by the port authorities as the location of the new port. So we need to be extremely careful in such cases. Nature-based solutions are very effective when it comes to resilience. You can also get some carbon credits from them. So we are quite active in those investments. And that's probably the starting point, right? I would rather start with nature-based solutions and then go into the engineering and geoengineering than the other way around.
Thank you. I'm sure there's lots more questions from the audience and online, but we are coming up to the end of the session. So I just want to quickly ask our panelists because I think we've had a great discussion. We've touched on nature-based solutions, we've touched on infrastructure, and energy systems, and also the impact and resilience of coastal communities and human settlements, where because ports are very much centre of communities. So I think I'd like to just ask you, each of you, very quickly in a quick fire round, what would be the one action we need to take away to scale and mainstream resilience?
Okay, I'm not a technical person, so I'm learning. And for me, as a financial institution, the important thing is the structure, some new initiatives, and it's not doesn't have to be just focusing on some small the silos, but maybe we as a FDB, our capability is to create some integrated the program, the programmatic approach. And then we can be always catalyzer, that to access to any type of finance. So maybe that's an area, yes.
I would say short-term data, medium-term awareness, long-term financing.
I would say that the question of resilience starts with security, quality of life at work of our people, seafarers, people working in the terminals, because they are the first in the front line, I would say, of the impact of climate change that we see. So this is for us the number one priority. Make sure that they are working in the safe and good conditions which can be affected. And in the second step, we really have to invest on our global infrastructures to make them adapted to the bad winds that are coming.
Yeah, so I think for ports especially, a lot of the technologies and all that are actually, I mean, we're a good time where actually many of these pieces are starting to fall in place. The technologies are maturing. Solar panels today, for example, is already cost competitive. So, but where we can see scope to do more is really about collaboration, really about how we can connect all the different ports in the world, how we can collaborate and how can we move this together. Because it is a space that's quite ripe for us to make big moves on. I think the Port of Singapore definitely believes in working with many others, I think, through various platforms, be it through our green and digital shipping corridors or the IMO and etc. But I think collaboration and partnership would be absolutely key in this journey.
Great, thank you very much. So a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you. And I think I would just like to say, like I said, the finding of the Sharm el-Sheikh Adaptation Agenda Progress Report, clearly says that transport and energy systems are underrepresented, and I think, this goes to show that there is action being taken in small pockets. There is a need for data. There's a need to integrate this into planning, and we've got actors here that are already doing that, but we do need to collaborate and come together so we can replicate and scale and advance even further. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Seth Schultz, the CEO of Resilience Rising, who's going to give us the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. And to all of you for braving a late evening session on, I don't know what this is. I've lost what day this is. Fourth day, fifth day? Thank you for the great conversation. I've got the pleasure to do a lot of thanks and to highlight a few things. I did want to mention, too, that there's a number of people, because of timing and logistics, that weren't able to join us today. But we have people online that I wanted to give a quick shout-out to. RAK Ports are on the line, AIVP, the Hamburg Port Authority, and the World Economic Forum of Maritime Sector Team, all online. Hello, we see you. Thank you for being with us today, as well as to those people in the room. Fantastic comments. Loved all the different perspectives that we just heard from the room, and particularly kind of the last roundup that we just had. One of the things that we talk a lot about constantly at Resilience Rising is that 21st century leadership is partnership. And I'm extremely excited about the Resilience for Ports program because at its core, it embodies partnership and collaboration. And we're not talking about, the difference between little c collaboration and big C collaboration. Everybody says they're collaborating. I call that little c collaboration. The big C collaboration, when you actually listen to each other, identify the challenges, and come up with common solutions, that's the big C stuff. And that's not easy. It's not easy at all. And one of the things I'm so excited about this program around ports and what you've heard is, and I think Rob kicked it off right from the beginning. You've seen one port, and yet we've got to find commonality between this system. If we want to see systemic change, which resilience requires, we have to figure out how to do that holistically. And a great example, we heard some of the speakers talk about green port corridors. Well, on either end of that, there's a port that has a different governance structure, is in a different country, and yet they have to have and move at the same speed and the same scale if that is going to continue working. If they don't, it won't. So we kind of think about ports as a gateway to resilience. As I think we heard some of the speakers talk about this, because it's connecting community, ecosystems, logistics, technology, and governance. And it's that richness and the complexity of that tapestry that is such a good breeding ground for the collaboration, the innovation that we need to see. I also wanted to highlight a few things that we're excited about and announcing is we're bringing on a new partnership, AIVP, I mentioned there on the line. And in particular things up on the screen, what they're bringing to the table and what we're excited to highlight is the pooling of the knowledge. So we heard a little bit, Rob mentioned the online library, one of the first of its kind in terms of an online portal for case studies about the collaboration and the innovation that's occurring. This is a kind of a shout out to anybody else who wants to join. Come one, come all. It's an open tool, resource. It's searchable, queryable, and we give direct site and access to the participants. So it's not like we're taking your information and keeping it there. We're taking that and funneling everybody back out to the source of where that information is. We launched this today. It's a go online. Rob is sharing the QR code. We've got about 50 different examples on there now. We're hoping to continue to grow that very rapidly. So this is kind of the pooling of the knowledge that we're talking about. We're also continuing to try to figure out ways to enhance the delivery of the goals that we outlined. Rob kicked those off and shared some of those in the Breakthrough Resilience Challenge. So these are some of the elements that we're looking for in terms of additional partnerships to the ones that we already have here around the room. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick shout out to the partners that we've gotten here this far. A number of key organizations that are present that I wanted to give a shout out to. So a big shout out and thank you to Catherine Palm, their high level champions team, for continuing to spearhead this. This has been a continuous journey of work and effort and leadership and advocacy in terms of the value proposition, the importance of collaboration, and then pulling us all together to do and achieve some of the things that we have been. So it takes a lot of continuity and a lot of pull through and a lot of consistency. I also want to give a big shout out to Theo on our team. He's in the back here. Theo did a lot to pull this together, coordinate all this, and a big thank you. Yeah, big thank you, Theo. And then the Resilience Hub itself. So we're Resilience Rising is one of the core founding and managing partners of the Resilience Hub. We now have 7 different managing partners. We continue to grow the hub and its presence to be a place during COP once a year where we can come together, highlight programs and collaboration exactly of this nature. A big thank you to Arup. Arup has been a kind of a champion of this and a leading technical partner and visionary on this from the very, very beginning, as is the Lloyd's Register Foundation. Ruth, thanks for being here and kicking this off and making this all happen. And especially one last big round of applause for all the panelists today for joining us. Thank you very much. So with that, I think we can wrap this session up. Thank you. I hope we see you again. And please stick around for discussions with any of the panelists if they have the time. Speakers stay just for we get one photo of everybody, please.